The blood-red sun slipped behind the jagged horizon of Arizona territory as Nora Vance gazed at her husband's fresh grave, her heart as barren as the dusty land around her. It was 1878. 3 years since the end of the Civil War had brought a flood of desperate men westward, and just 3 days since James had drawn his final breath, leaving her with nothing but a failing cattle ranch, crushing debt, and memories that cut like broken glass. "You swore you'd never leave," she whispered to the wooden cross, her voice catching on the wind. "You promised we would build something lasting." The tears had dried up days ago, leaving only a hollow ache where her heart used to be. At 32, Nora had already weathered more storms than most. She'd buried her parents, survived the war while tending to wounded soldiers, and followed James west with dreams of a new beginning. Now she stood alone, her dark hair escaping its pins as the evening wind picked up, carrying dust and the promise of another cold desert night. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her turn. A lone rider appeared on the ridge, silhouetted against the fading light. Nora tensed, her hand moving to the small revolver concealed in the folds of her black morning dress. Out here, 30 miles from the nearest town of Copper Springs, strangers rarely brought good news. The rider approached slowly, respectfully, as if understanding he was interrupting a private moment. When he was close enough, he removed his hat, revealing a weathered face and eyes the color of the turquoise that the local tribes mined from the nearby hills. "Evening, madam," he said, his voice deep but gentle. "Name's Noah York. I don't mean to intrude on your grief." Nora's hand remained near her weapon. "What business brings you to my property, Mr. York?" He gestured toward the setting sun. "Nightfall's coming, and I've been riding since dawn. Was hoping you might spare some water for my horse before I make camp a ways down the trail." She studied him carefully. His clothes were dusty but not ragged, his saddle well-maintained. The rifle in his scabbard looked clean and cared for. Not a drifter, then. Something about the quiet dignity in his posture made her relax slightly. "There's a pump by the barn," she said finally. "You're welcome to water your horse." He nodded gratefully. "Much obliged." As he turned to lead his horse away, Nora noticed the badge partially concealed by his vest. "You're a lawman?" Noah paused. "U.S. Marshal. Tracking a gang that's been hitting ranches between here and the New Mexico border." The mention of raiders sent a chill through her. James had worried about such men in his final weeks, had even purchased extra ammunition for their rifles. "My husband's fresh in the ground," she said, a bitterness creeping into her voice. "I've nothing worth stealing now." Noah's gaze moved to the grave and back to her face, compassion evident in his eyes. "I'm sorry for your loss, madam. Mrs. Vance. Nora Vance." The formality felt important somehow, a last grip on the life she had known. "Mrs. Vance." He nodded respectfully. "If you don't mind my asking, is there anyone staying with you? Family, perhaps?" "No," she replied simply. "Just me." Concern crossed his features. "It's not safe for a woman alone out here." "I'm well aware of that, Marshal York," she said, drawing herself up. "But this ranch is all I have left." He seemed about to say something more when a distant rumble of thunder interrupted them. Both looked toward the western horizon where dark clouds were building. "Storm's coming," he observed. "Best get your livestock secured." Nora glanced toward the small corral where her 2 horses and milk cow stood. "I can manage." Noah looked skeptical but didn't argue. He led his horse to the pump and began working the handle. Nora turned back to James's grave, placing a smooth stone atop the freshly turned earth, a habit she'd developed in the days since his passing. The first fat raindrops began to fall as she made her way back to the modest cabin. By the time she reached the porch, the rain was coming down in sheets. Through the curtain of water, she saw Noah hurriedly securing his horse under the barn's overhang. On impulse, she called out to him, "Marshal, you'll catch your death out there. Come inside until it passes." He hesitated only briefly before jogging across the yard to her porch, water streaming from his hat brim. "Mighty kind of you, Mrs. Vance." Inside, the cabin was simple but clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. A small table with 4 chairs sat in what served as both kitchen and dining area, and a curtained-off section concealed her bed. James's things remained untouched, his hat still hanging by the door, his boots beside the hearth. Nora busied herself lighting the oil lamp and stoking the fire, while Noah stood awkwardly just inside the door, water pooling beneath him. "Take off that wet coat," she instructed. "There's a hook by the door." He complied, hanging his dripping coat and hat. His tall frame seemed to shrink the already small cabin. "When did your husband pass?" he asked carefully, settling into a chair she offered him. 3 days ago. Consumption." She poured coffee from the pot that had been keeping warm on the stove. "Been coming on for months. The doctor in town said the dry air might help, but—" She trailed off, the familiar ache returning. Noah accepted the cup gratefully. No family to send for? None that would come. James's family never approved of him marrying a nurse with no prospects. "My parents are long gone." She sat across from him, cradling her own cup. "The neighbors from the closest ranch, the Harises, helped with the burial, but they've got their own troubles. Droughts hit everyone hard this season." The rain drummed steadily on the roof, creating a cocoon of sound around them. For the first time in days, Nora felt the crushing solitude lift slightly. "What will you do now?" Noah asked. She smiled without humor. "Survive. What else is there? Selling might be an option. There's towns where a woman with your skills could know." Her response was immediate, firm. James poured everything into this place. His dreams, his strength. "What little money we had. I won't surrender it." Noah studied her over the rim of his cup. "It's dangerous country for anyone alone, Mrs. Vance, but especially for a woman." She finished for him, an edge to her voice. "I've sutured wounds under cannon fire, Marshal. I've delivered babies during blizzards. I'm not afraid of hard work or solitude." "I meant no offense," he said quietly. "Only that there are men in these parts who prey on the vulnerable." The rain intensified, rattling the windows. Nora rose and moved to check that the shutters were secure. As she reached for one window, a sharp pain shot through her side, a remnant of the long days and nights tending to James, lifting him when he grew too weak to move himself. Noah noticed her wince. "You're hurt." "It's nothing. Just tired." She straightened, determined not to show weakness. "The storm looks to be settling in. You're welcome to the floor by the fire for the night." He looked surprised at the offer. "I wouldn't want to impose or compromise your reputation." A bitter laugh escaped her. "My reputation? Out here? The nearest neighbor is 5 miles away, and I doubt the coyotes will carry tales." She gestured to the window where rain was now coming down in blinding sheets. "Besides, only a fool would ride in that." Noah conceded with a nod. "Then I accept your hospitality, Mrs. Vance. And I insist on earning my keep. Any repairs need doing around here." The question caught her off guard. There were dozens of things that needed attention: the leaking roof, the broken corral gate, the well pump that required increasing effort to draw water. James had been too ill to manage repairs for months. "Nothing that can't wait for better weather," she replied, unwilling to appear needy. Noah saw through her pride. "I noticed your barn door hanging crooked. First thing tomorrow, I'll set it right before I head out." "Why would you do that?" "Because it needs doing," he said simply, as if that explained everything. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them as the storm raged outside. Nora found herself studying the Marshal when he wasn't looking, the lines around his eyes that spoke of long days in the sun, the careful way he held himself, alert even in repose. "How long have you been a Marshal?" she asked finally. 8 years. Took the badge after the war." "You fought?" He nodded. "Union cavalry. Spent most of it in Tennessee and Georgia. I nursed in Virginia, mostly. Field hospital outside Richmond." She paused, memories flooding back. "Seems like another lifetime now. War has a way of making everything after it feel borrowed," Noah said, his voice distant. "Like you're living on time that wasn't meant to be yours." The observation struck Nora deeply. It was exactly how she'd felt since the war, as if she'd already used up her allotted years and was now existing on some strange extension, waiting for the ledger to be balanced. "Did you lose someone?" she asked. "My brother. Shiloh." He said it plainly, but she could hear the old grief underneath. "You? My father at Bull Run. And a piece of my faith in humanity, watching boys die cursing the same God, just with different accents." Noah regarded her thoughtfully. "Yet you still came west. Still believed in something." "James believed. I just followed." She stood abruptly, uncomfortable with how easily this stranger was reading her. "I should check the animals before turning in." "I'll go." Noah offered, already rising. You've had a long day. Before she could protest, he had pulled on his damp coat and disappeared into the rain. Through the window, Nora watched his silhouette move toward the barn, a strange sense of relief washing over her. For just this night, someone else was shouldering a small part of her burden. When Noah returned, soaked again but reporting that all animals were secure, Nora handed him a blanket and pillow. It's not much, she apologized. It's dry and warm. That's luxury enough. He arranged his makeshift bed near the hearth. Nora retreated behind the curtain to her own bed, listening to the rain and the occasional shifting of the Marshal on the floor. For the first time since James's death, she didn't feel entirely alone. The storm passed during the night, and dawn broke clear and fresh. Nora woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of hammering. She dressed quickly and emerged to find the cabin empty but the coffee pot warm on the stove. Through the window, she saw Noah working on the barn door, his movements efficient and precise. She poured herself a cup and stepped onto the porch, watching him work. There was something comforting about seeing a man engaged in purposeful labor on her property again. It reminded her of the early days with James, before the illness had stolen his strength. Noah noticed her and paused, raising a hand in greeting. Hope I didn't wake you. Thought I'd get an early start. You've already done more than courtesy requires, Marshal. He shrugged, returning to his task. Seems like the least I can do. Nora spent the morning tending to her meager garden and feeding the animals while Noah fixed not only the barn door, but also the sagging porch step and the corral gate. By midday, he had his horse saddled and was preparing to leave. I appreciate the repairs, Nora said, standing awkwardly by the gate. And the company. Noah secured his saddlebags. It was nothing, but Mrs. Vance. He hesitated. I still think you should consider your options. This isn't an easy life, especially alone. I've never expected easy, she replied, lifting her chin. Safe passage, Marshal. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. I'll be in the territory for a while yet, tracking that gang. Would it be an imposition if I stopped by on my return journey? Just to check that you're faring well. The offer surprised her. I suppose not. With a tip of his hat, he mounted and rode off, the dust settling behind him as his figure grew smaller on the horizon. Nora returned to her empty cabin, somehow feeling the silence more acutely than before. 2 weeks passed, each day a struggle against the unyielding land and her own grief. Nora worked from dawn until dusk, mending fences, tending animals, and trying to salvage what remained of James's dreams. At night, exhausted, she would sit on the porch and look at the stars, wondering how long she could sustain this solitary existence. It was on such an evening that she heard the approaching riders. 3 men, their horses lathered from hard riding, emerged from the growing darkness. Nora reached for her revolver, stepping back into the shadows of the porch. Hello, the house, called the lead rider, a man with a shock of red hair beneath a battered hat. We're looking for water and a place to rest our horses. Pumps by the barn, Nora called back, keeping her distance. Help yourselves and move on. The men exchanged glances, and Nora felt a trickle of fear. The one with red hair dismounted slowly. Now that ain't very hospitable, madam. We've been riding hard, and night's coming on. I'm not running a hotel, Nora replied firmly. There's a town 15 miles south. The second man spat a stream of tobacco juice. 15 miles is a far piece in the dark. Red hair took a step toward the porch. We heard there was a widow woman out here. That you? Nora's grip tightened on her revolver. My business is my own. Water your horses and move along. Might be we could pay for a meal, the third man suggested, his voice deceptively reasonable. Got money. I'm not interested. Red hair's friendly demeanor slipped. Ain't asking, lady. We're coming in, and you're going to feed us. Maybe provide some other comforts too. He took another step forward, and Nora raised her revolver, stepping into the light. That's close enough. The men tensed, hands moving toward their own weapons. The standoff held for one breathless moment. Then Red Hair smiled slowly. Now, 3 against 1. Those ain't odds I'd bet on. Then it's fortunate you won't have to. The voice came from behind the men. They whirled to find Noah York sitting easily on his horse, rifle trained on Red Hair's chest. Evening, gentlemen, Noah said, his tone conversational, but his eyes hard. U.S. Marshal. I suggest you reconsider your plans for the evening. Red Hair's hand hovered near his pistol. 3 against 2 ain't much better odds. Marshal, you sure about that? Noah's aim never wavered. I only need 1 bullet for you. Your friends might get luckier, but I wouldn't count on it. The tension stretched tight as wire. Then the third man raised his hand slowly. Come on, Decker. Ain't worth dying over. Red-haired Decker glared, but finally raised his hands as well. Just looking for some hospitality. You can find it in the Copper Springs jail, Noah replied. Been looking for you boys. 3 ranches hit in the last month. 1 rancher dead. You got no proof of that, Decker snarled. Don't need it yet. Just need to bring you in. Noah gestured with his rifle. Mrs. Vance, if you'd be so kind as to help disarm these gentlemen. With steady hands, Nora collected their weapons while Noah kept them covered. Once they were secured, he produced handcuffs from his saddlebags. Sorry to impose again, he said to Nora as he cuffed the men. Need to borrow your barn to hold them overnight. We'll ride for town at first light. Of course, she replied, still processing what had just happened. There are some chains in there that might help secure them. With the prisoners securely locked in the barn, Noah returned to the porch where Nora waited, her arms wrapped around herself despite the warm evening. You have impeccable timing, Marshal, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I was already on my way back, he admitted. Picked up their trail this morning. They've been working this area for weeks. Nora invited him inside, and as they sat at her small table, sharing a simple meal of beans and cornbread, she found herself studying him again, the quiet competence, the way he seemed to fill the room with his presence without imposing on it. You saved my life tonight, she said finally. Noah shook his head. You were holding your own, but I'm glad I arrived when I did. How did you know they'd come here? Pattern. They've been hitting isolated homesteads, especially those run by women alone. He paused. Been worried about you since I left. The admission hung in the air between them. Nora looked away, uncomfortable with the concern in his eyes. I can take care of myself. Never said you couldn't. But everyone needs help sometimes. Noah set down his fork. Mrs. Vance. Nora, this land is beautiful but unforgiving. Even the strongest spirit can break under its weight. Is that what you think of me? A spirit about to break. She stood, gathering their empty plates with more force than necessary. No, he said quietly. I think you're the most resilient woman I've ever met. But I also think you're carrying too much alone. The simple truth of his words pierced through her carefully constructed defenses. She set the plates down and gripped the edge of the basin, fighting sudden tears. He promised we would build a life here, she whispered. We had plans: cattle, crops, maybe children someday. Then the coughing started. Everything fell apart so quickly. Noah stayed seated, giving her space. Grief has its own timeline. You can't rush it. It's not just grief. She turned to face him. He broke my soul when he left me here alone with nothing but debt and dust. I was a nurse. I could have had a life in a city somewhere. Instead, I'm here, fighting every day just to keep breathing. Her confession hung in the silence between them. Noah stood slowly and crossed to where she stood. Carefully, as if approaching a wounded animal, he reached for her hand. Then let me mend it, he said softly. 1 day at a time. Nora stared at him, startled by the offer and the emotion behind it. You don't even know me. I know enough, he replied. I know you're strong and proud and stubborn. I know you've survived things that would break most people. I'd like the chance to know more. She withdrew her hand, the sudden intimacy overwhelming. You're leaving tomorrow, taking those men to jail. And then I'm coming back, if you'll allow it. His eyes held hers, steady and certain. I've been wandering since the war, Nora. Never found a reason to stop. But something about this place, about you, makes me want to try. The honesty of his words left her speechless. Part of her wanted to accept what he was offering, not just help, but companionship, the possibility of something more. Another part recoiled, protective of her raw grief and newfound independence. I need time, she said finally. Noah nodded, stepping back. Time you shall have. I'll be back in a week, after I deliver these men to territorial authorities. If you want me to ride on by then, I will. That night, Nora lay awake, listening to Noah's occasional movements as he checked on the prisoners. His presence on her property felt both comforting and unsettling, a disruption to the solitary routine she'd established, yet a reminder of how vulnerable she truly was. Morning came with a blaze of golden light across the desert. Noah prepared to leave with his prisoners, securing them to their horses with lengths of rope. "A week then," he said as he mounted his own horse. "Unless you'd rather I didn't return." Nora stood on the porch, arms crossed. "A week," she agreed. "Safe journey, Marshal." As she watched him ride away with the 3 sullen men in tow, Nora felt an unexpected hollowness. She returned to her chores with mechanical efficiency, but her thoughts kept straying to Noah's words. "Let me mend it, one day at a time." The days passed slowly. Nora worked from sunrise to sunset, repairing what she could, tending her small garden, caring for the animals. Each night, she sat on the porch and watched the stars emerge, thinking about choices and second chances. On the 6th day, a rider approached from the east. Nora shaded her eyes against the setting sun, recognizing Elijah Harris, her nearest neighbor. "Evening, Mrs. Vance," he called as he dismounted. "Thought I'd check in on you. Heard there was some trouble." "News travels fast," she observed, offering him water. "Marshal York stopped by our place on his way to town with those outlaws. Said they'd intended to raid your ranch." Elijah accepted the dipper gratefully. "Glad you're all right." "Thanks to the Marshal's timing," Nora acknowledged. Elijah shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Vance. Nora, Sarah and I have been talking. If you're considering selling, we might be interested in taking on this parcel. Not for much. Mind you, times are hard all around, but it would give you something to start fresh elsewhere." The offer wasn't unexpected. The Harrises had been eyeing James's water rights for years. "I appreciate the thought, Elijah, but I'm not selling." He looked surprised. "You're staying?" "Alone. For now," she replied, thinking of Noah's promised return the next day. "We'll see what the future holds." After Elijah left, Nora walked to James's grave. The wooden cross stood stark against the evening sky, already weathering in the harsh elements. "I loved you," she said softly. "I would have followed you anywhere. But I need to find my own path now." She placed another stone on the grave, the last one, she decided. It was time to stop marking days of grief and start counting days of healing instead. The 7th day dawned clear and hot. Nora found herself moving restlessly around the cabin, straightening things that didn't need straightening, checking the window more often than necessary. By midday, she had convinced herself that Noah wasn't coming back, that his offer had been mere kindness, soon forgotten. It was late afternoon when she spotted the dust cloud on the horizon. Shading her eyes, she made out a single rider approaching steadily. As he drew closer, she recognized Noah's straight-backed posture and the distinctive gait of his horse. He dismounted at the gate, removing his hat as she walked out to meet him. "Mrs. Vance." "Marshal York." She nodded, suddenly awkward. "You came back. I said I would." His eyes searched her face. "Have you decided? Should I keep riding?" Nora took a deep breath. "No. I'd like you to stay. For supper, at least." A smile touched his lips. Supper would be a fine start. They walked together toward the cabin, a respectful distance between them, but a new understanding forming. "Those men have been remanded to territorial custody," Noah informed her. "They won't trouble this area again." "Good." She glanced at him. "Does this mean your work here is done? Will you be moving on?" Noah stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "That depends on you, Nora. I meant what I said. I'd like to help you rebuild this ranch, your life. Whatever you'll allow." "Why?" she asked bluntly. "What could possibly interest you about a widow with a failing ranch and a broken heart?" "I see courage in you," he replied simply. "And kindness, despite everything you've endured. Those are rare qualities in this harsh country." He gestured to the land around them. "And I see possibility here, not just in the ranch, but in the life two people might build together if given time." "I'm still grieving," she warned. "I know. I'm not asking for promises. Just permission to return, to help, to get to know you properly." He smiled slightly. "One day at a time, remember?" Nora studied him, this steady, honorable man who had ridden back into her life by choice rather than chance. Something unfamiliar stirred within her, not happiness exactly, but its distant cousin, hope. "I could use help repairing the roof," she said finally. "And the well needs attention before winter." Noah's smile widened. "I'm handy with tools. And I'm a decent cook when I have something to cook with. I'm a fair hunter." They stood looking at each other, the beginnings of a partnership taking shape between them. Nora didn't know what the future held, but for the first time since James's death, she wanted to find out. One day at a time, then, she agreed, extending her hand. Noah took it gently, his calloused fingers warm against hers. That's all anyone can ask for. As the sun began its descent behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the land they both loved, Nora felt something within her shift, not a healing yet, but the first acknowledgement that healing might be possible. With Noah beside her, she walked back toward the cabin, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. Over the following months, Noah became a fixture at the ranch. He maintained his duties as a marshal, riding out when required, but always returned to help with the endless work of keeping the land productive. Together, they repaired buildings, tended livestock, and planted crops that might actually survive in the unforgiving soil. The first time Noah made her laugh, a genuine, unexpected sound that surprised them both felt like crossing an invisible threshold. The first time their hands touched accidentally while working and neither pulled away marked another milestone. As summer turned to autumn, Nora found herself watching for his return from his increasingly shorter patrols, her heart lightening at the sight of him cresting the ridge. They spent evenings on the porch, talking about their pasts, their hopes, the war that had shaped them both. When winter came, bringing rare snow to the high desert, Noah officially took leave from his martial duties. The night he asked if he might court her properly was the same night she finally took down James's hat from its hook by the door. "Are you sure?" Noah asked, watching her carefully fold the hat and place it in a trunk. "Yes," she said simply. "James will always be part of my past. But you're here now, in my present." Spring brought new calves from the small herd they'd started together, green shoots in the garden, and the first tentative kiss, gentle and questioning, as they stood among the wildflowers that had erupted across the once barren land. By summer's end, a year after Noah had first ridden onto her property, Nora Vance became Nora York in a small ceremony attended by the Harises and a few others from town. The local preacher blessed their union beneath the cottonwood tree that shaded James's grave, a decision that felt right to both of them, acknowledging the past while embracing the future. That night, as they sat on the porch of what was now their home, Nora leaned against Noah's shoulder. "You kept your promise," she said softly. "One day at a time." He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "And I intend to keep right on with it, for all the days we have." The ranch flourished under their combined care, Noah's strength and practical knowledge blending perfectly with Nora's determination and healing touch. They added rooms to the cabin as their family grew. First a son with Noah's turquoise eyes, then a daughter with Nora's stubborn chin. Years later, when their children were old enough to ask about the weathered cross visible from the porch, Nora would tell them about James not as a ghost that haunted her, but as a man who had loved the same land they now called home. She would explain how life sometimes takes unexpected turns, how grief can hollow you out, but also create space for new joy to take root. And in the quiet moments, when the day's work was done and they watched the desert sunset paint the sky in impossible colors, Nora would often find Noah's hand seeking hers, their fingers intertwining in the wordless understanding of two people who had found each other when they needed it most, who had chosen to build something lasting together, one day at a time.